All right, so people are very unhappy with the way that chatbots are going. Uh, if you've been keeping up with the news or if you've used them yourself, uh, Opus 4.7, which is Anthropic's latest model, was released to initial fanfare. You know, it does really well on the benchmarks, but then most of the internet really kind of decided that it's a terrible model. They don't like it, you know, it's not warm and that sort of thing. And the thing that what really inspired me to make this video is because all the complaints, and when I say all the complaints, what I mean is, like, you know, people speaking very loudly on places like Reddit and Twitter and those kinds of things. The complaints really closely echo what I have been complaining about, both with ChatGPT, so OpenAI, and Anthropic's Claude, over the last 6 to 12 months. And for a while, I felt like I was shouting into the void, because I even made videos about it that were kind of a complete flop. Like, I made a video a few months back about how, like, AI can't stop putting words in my mouth, and you know, a few of you watched it, but it didn't it pretty dramatically underperformed. And what I realized is, like, okay, this is like, I'm kind of ahead of the Overton window, but I don't want to talk about myself too much. I just wanted to say that was the inspiration for making this video. And the other part of inspiration is that my wife is rereading the book In Shitification, which, if you're not familiar with this book, I can't remember the name of the author. Basically, he talks about, like, the how and why that all technology seems to just, it starts really good and then it gets worse over time. In the case of social media, it has to do with incentive structures and algorithms and that sort of thing, which is basically, social media has, it relies on what's called a network effect, or the Lindy effect, where basically the utility of social media is dependent upon the fact that everyone else has to use it. If you have a social media platform that only a tenth of your friends use, you're not going to use that. And that's the same reason that, like, Bitcoin is still the most popular cryptocurrency. It's not the best, it's not the latest, but it's the one that everyone uses, which increases its utility. And that can be good in some things. In some cases, network effects or Lindy effects are really powerful. One big example, I just watched a video yesterday about the Cessna 172, which is like, why is this the most popular airplane of all time? And it has to do with not the fact that it's not necessarily the best airplane anymore. There are better, newer airplanes out there that are more efficient, that are faster, that have, you know, fancy new safety features, but it became the industry standard many, many years ago, which meant that there was more spare parts for it. There was more trainers on it. More airports used it, or more schools use it. More mechanics knew how to work on it. And then because of its track record and its safety data, it was cheaper to own. And so when you look at the total cost of ownership, it's not just about the quality of the thing. Now that is an example of where network effects can be beneficial, because then it's like, okay, this becomes the industry standard. It has market dominance. And, you know, yes, there might be things that are slightly better, but the total cost of ownership and the safety track record can't be beat. However, with social media, because the landscape of social media is very different, you're incentivized to get as many people on platform and then keep them there as much as possible. And every platform does this, whether it's Substack, whether it's Twitter, whatever, all of them. What they all are trying to optimize for is time on platform, which means they're also competing with each other for time on platform. Because when you look at, like, YouTube, I think the statistics are, it's like the average YouTube user spends less than 34 minutes per day on platform. And, you know, Nikita Beer, who is the head of product at Twitter, he's like, oh yeah, we got average time on platform up to 54 minutes. That's the only metric they care about, and they don't care what you're doing on platform. And yeah, Elon Musk has said, like, oh, you know, I want to minimize regretted user seconds. Well, the best way to minimize regretted user seconds is to get them off the internet, right? So it's like, any time that you spend on social media is time that you could have been doing something better. Now, that's not to say that there are not useful things that you can do. So for instance, like, if you read a good Substack article and it adds value to your life, that is a thing that can happen. If you're watching a good YouTube video that enriches you and makes you feel more confident or, you know, comfortable, like, hopefully that's the value that I bring, where it's like, I watch Dave and I feel like I'm more grounded and more oriented. Hopefully that's not regretted user time. but that is also time that you could have been putting your eyeballs somewhere else, maybe reading a book or, doing real work or whatever. Now, I know that a lot of you like, side screen, or listen to me as a podcast while you're driving. So if you're doing double duty, then that's great. But I don't want you wasting any time. So when you have this competitive dynamic, and there is a point to all this. So I can hear some of you getting lost. You're like, why are you talking about Cessnas and social media? We're talking about chatbots here. And it's because the chatbots are also competing with each other in the same exact way that social media is competing with each other. Because, like, yes, they're all compute constrained, but at the same time, when you have a bunch of free tier users and then you want to convert them to paid tier users, and you also want to build user trust, and you also don't want to get sued, and there's all these different incentive structures in the same way that social media companies have, they want people using their website. They don't care what you're doing on it, whether you're looking at, naked women or whether you're, rage baiting people or whatever. That is the incentive structure. And I've talked to people that have worked at Silicon Valley social media companies, and no matter how benevolent a platform starts, it's just human nature. When you have a screen and a keyboard between you and other people just get nasty. And the same things happen, whether it is like, a Facebook group, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Reddit. People just get nasty, and they're triggered by the same exact things, whether it's negativity bias or outrage or whatever else. That's just how people work on the internet. And the shape of the internet is still a mirror imprint of our limbic system and our social operating system. So there's only so much you can do. Now, let's set the social media part aside, because that's the enshittification of social media. Now, I have a theory as to why this happens with chatbots. And at first I thought it was like, okay, maybe they're just optimizing for cost because, all the tokens that we use are still heavily subsidized, because it's like you hear like, oh, OpenAI is going to lose $19 billion this year. And it's like, well, where's that money going? And it's going to keeping the chatbots that you like to use cheaper to use and easier to use. And so that is one thing where they have an incentive to like shave off, some of the thought tokens, even if you're paying for them. Because even if you're paying for them, you're still not paying cost. They're still losing money, even if you're paying for thinking and reasoning, meaning that the more thinking and reasoning that you use, even though you think you're paying for it, they're still losing on it. So that's incentive structure number one, which is just cost. They're trying to not go broke. They're trying to reach break-even point. And as you've probably seen in the news, OpenAI is really struggling. And they're like, we're not going to be cash positive until 2030 or whatever it happens to be. They're always changing it. And the CFO, like, there's the rumors that the CFO was like being kept out of conversations by Sam Altman because Sam Altman didn't like the negativity of the CFO, which is like, okay, manipulative people are going to be manipulative. What else do you expect of Sam? I blocked him on Twitter. Tired of him. Anyways, so that's incentive structure number one. Incentive structure number two is don't get sued. So you might have remembered last year, Anthropic got sued to the tune of $1.5 billion for stealing books to train their models. So and this is where I want to remind people, like, when Anthropic got kicked out of the Pentagon, and I was like, they deserved it. Like, a lot of you are like, no, they're standing up to the man and they're standing up for us little guy. They're not standing up for the little guy. They are a for-profit company just like everyone else, and they have what they feel is a, divine mandate to save us all from superintelligence, which is great, but they're also very much falling into like the ends justify the means kind of mentality. And as they say, the path to hell is paved by good intentions. Now, that's not to say that Anthropic is an intrinsically evil company and that Dario is just as manipulative as Sam. I think he's more delusional than Sam. Anyways, that's a little bit of a rant. That's a little bit of a tangent. They can both be delusional and manipulative, just in slightly different ratios. But they're trying not to get sued, which means like, okay, if you have a chatbot that is going to give legal advice, even when, because people will jailbreak it, or people will say like, my chatbot told me to fire my lawyer and I fired my lawyer and then we all got sued. Yay. Because for-profit companies, all companies really are number one risk minimizing entities. This is every Fortune 500 company, every small business, every enterprise, every single company on the planet is first and foremost a risk reduction company and a cost reduction company. This is something that I had to learn when I was consulting for bigger companies, because it's like, just for instance, when you hear all the things like, oh, Fortune 500 company A, B, and C said that they didn't get any value from AI, and it's like they didn't get any value that they knew how to measure. And so it's like, well, yes, we can spend $20 to $50 a month on Copilot and that sort of thing, and it might have made people, twice as efficient at writing emails. But even though they were individually more efficient, that doesn't mean that the company bottom line was directly hit. And that's because the companies have not started to restructure around these new capabilities. So when you look at the fact that all companies are risk averse first and foremost, then they're going to make their chatbots, they're going to lobotomize them, they're going to make them, less fun to work with and that sort of thing, because they don't want you addicted to them in some respects. Now, obviously that doesn't pass the sniff test, because when, a couple of years ago, Sam tweeted out her, when they were going to introduce the voice mode, he was literally thinking and cluing people into the idea that they wanted to create a companion that would be addictive to use. They don't have the compute for it, and of course they've delayed the advanced voice mode seemingly indefinitely. I don't know if it's working now, not to the level that they've promised, but they don't want to get sued, because then what happened is some of their users started, like offing themselves and that sort of thing. And, the calculus is like, who's culpable, right? Because first and foremost, like prima facie, if you look at the lawsuit, are they culpable? But then it doesn't, it at a certain level, it doesn't matter whether or not they are legally culpable, because in some cases, someone ignored all the warnings that the chatbot was giving. The chatbot's like, please get help, please get help, please get help. Or in other cases, they jailbroke the chatbot, so they broke the EULA in terms of service. But of course, what some people don't seem to understand is that a terms of service doesn't invalidate the law of the land. I think there are some people out there who think that, oh, well, if you violated the terms of service, then your life is in your own hands. You cannot actually contractually overrule the law of the land. Like, this is there's a very old thought experiment, which is like, what if you sign a contract for someone to kill you? That's still illegal. It doesn't matter if it was a contract. If like murder is illegal, just full stop. Likewise, depending on, and part of the problem is that liability for chatbots and AI has not been fully litigated or fully established. So these companies want to avoid getting sued, which means they lobotomize their models. They literally reduce the emotional intelligence of the models and have them default to being safe or cagey or whatever, which means that they'll often like start to lecture you and that sort of thing. And then the incentive structure number 3 is they want them to be useful. And part of the biggest problem that we've been struggling with over the last few years, that everyone, whenever a doctor says, like, I can't use it because it hallucinates, when a university says, I'm not going to use it because it hallucinates, hallucination. This is one of the biggest things that they see as a barrier to it being adopted by, serious industry people, doctors, lawyers, Fortune 500 companies, financial planners, military. So they want to cut down on hallucination, which means they have to cut down on, number one, sycophancy. So they're like, okay, I'm just going to agree with the user's frame at all times. The user might be delusional, right? Like in technology, it's always a layer 8 issue. It's always an ID10T issue. It's always a PEBCAC issue where the user is the weakest link. And so if you have this delusional user, and by the way, like, AI psychosis has been around for a while. I've seen it since GPT-3 when I was like doing consultations and stuff. Like, people react very oddly to AI. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do you keep, it is an edge case, right? But how do you keep the delusional users from like going off the deep end and spiraling? You have to make the AI critical. You have to make the AI say, well, I hear you, but I'm going to trust my judgment better. But the thing is their judgment is still not that great. And when you train an AI to say, always question the user's motives and always question the user's delusional worldview, it just makes it really annoying. And because they're just calculation machines, they're always calculating, well, you said that thing that I can tear down. And it's like talking with a Redditor. It's like they will still change the subject just to dunk on you, because in somewhere in their training scheme, their post-training or RLHF or RLAIF or whatever, um, they are they are trained to basically like look for entry points to say, where can you prove the user wrong? Where can you say that the user is wrong? And that comes from a benevolent point, which is, one, don't hallucinate and don't overly be sycophantic, and also don't give in to delusional worldviews. But the thing is it does it inappropriately. These chatbots do it inappropriately, where it's like, and I've posted some screenshots on Twitter and stuff where it's like the chatbot will say, I need to push back on this idea that you had, and then proceed to agree with you. So they've built in this instinct to just disagree with you, just to be argumentative, just to like, fact check you or whatever. And it serves no purpose, and it destroys the user experience. So it's like, we can't have nice things because of all these different incentive structures. And that's why I brought up social media, is because it's like, there's what social media could be, right? It could be like the Borg hive mind, where we're all in perfect unison and we're all getting stuff done and we're coming to collective decisions. But then there's 4chan and Reddit and trolls and that sort of thing, and keyboard warriors. And so the human element breaks social media. Likewise, the fact that, OpenAI has what? They have like 900 million monthly average users right now or something like that. When you have a sample size that big, you're going to have some people that are delusional. You're going to have some people that are addictive, that have addictive personalities. You're going to have some people that are going to use it for nefarious things and get the company sued. You're going to have just stupid users. And so like, you might be like, Dave, this, like, I can probably guess that some of you will be angry at me for saying like, it's your fault, you stupid users. But like, anyone in technology will tell you that like the user is always the weakest link, and it's why we can't have nice things. So, and that's not to absolve the companies of responsibility. That's not to say that like OpenAI and Anthropic couldn't do this a little bit better, right? Because they can. Back when I was fine-tuning GPT-3, you can absolutely train these models to recognize, okay, this user is smart, I don't need to handle them with kid gloves. This user is emotionally stable, I don't need to, pathologize every little thing that they say. You can do that. The fact that they don't means that they're just not that smart. And like, okay, yes, like these are smart people and they're making these like great tools, but they learn slowly. And also, you have, again, the humans being the weakest link is true for these companies as well. Because like I every now and then I have people from these companies, like I've had people from Grok and Gemini reach out to me. They're like, this is really good feedback. How do I make it more useful? I'm like, stop treating me like an idiot. But they don't know how to do that, how to treat a user as smart while also maintaining vigilance to like, is this user entertaining delusional worldviews? And so they just have it set to constantly criticize the user and that sort of stuff. So I guess that's my rant for today. This is it's about 18 minutes right now, so I'll let y'all go. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Cheers.